Okay, welcome to the podcast today, everybody. Before I get to the topic, I want to talk about the thing that's on everybody's mind, I think, these days here at DOT and in Nebraska, and that's the flood. It's been the biggest natural disaster we've seen in our state's history, and it's had a huge impact to our road system. We had 3,300 miles of state highways closed at the peak of the event, and today we're down to just 103 miles. And that progress has been because of the tremendous work done by the men and women at DOT. I just can't thank the folks enough for all the work they've done to get our system up and running again. And the heart and soul that people put into this effort. I talked to people who had been on the job for 30 hours, 40 hours, even 50 hours, trying to get the roads clear and get them open and get them barricaded if they got water on them. And it was just really amazing to see how much people put into it and how willing they were to set things aside and just focus on the safety of the traveling public on our highway system. So, I'm always proud of the people at DOT, but it was never more clear than during these last couple of weeks. And so if you're a DOT person, thank you. If you're not, thank the folks at DOT when you see them. They deserve a ton of credit for getting us where we are. And our work's not done, but we sure are proud of what we've accomplished so far. Today's podcast, though, is about construction season. It's hard to believe, I think, that we came out of such a hard winter and then this flood and then construction season is just around the corner. And that means we'll be cranking out the construction projects. And that means work zones and that means work zone safety. I have a special guest today, Mark Segerstrom. He's from the Nebraska Safety Council and has been a great partner when it comes to talking about work zone safety and traffic safety. And so we wanted to get him here and share some of his thoughts on work zone safety and why it's so important. And, we have so many folks who are out there working long hours on the side of the road trying to make sure our system is in good condition and that we're making the improvements that are going to support our economic growth as a state. But ultimately, these are our people. They're our neighbors. They're our friends and our family. And we got to make sure they get home safe. And so that's why work zone safety and work zone awareness is so important. Let's get to the conversation with Mark. So I'm joined here on the podcast today by Mark Segerstrom. Mark, you're with the Nebraska Safety Council.
I am.
Tell me a little bit about that organization and what you do.
Sure. So Nebraska Safety Council is a nonprofit organization here in Lincoln, and we work with employers and employees across the state in various workplace facilities and settings. We have programs for workplace safety as well as workplace wellness and also traffic safety. And so my role is within traffic safety there at the council. Basically, that gives me the ability to go out and speak to employers and employees across the state about traffic safety issues, whether it's the current situation that we're having with flooding, occupant protection, child restraint, motorcycle safety, pre-trip inspection for commercial motor vehicles. I get to have a lot of autonomy and really get that safety message out there.
Yeah, so you said employers there, so you're talking about maybe people who have a lot of freight that's moving, a lot of transportation in their business, but I assume other things as well.
That's a great point. When I reach out to employers, it's not uncommon that they'll say, I'm not sure we have a need for you. We don't have a fleet of vehicles.
And you say, let me tell you.
let me talk about your staff assistant or, people that just work in your office that are pushing papers every day. There's a responsibility of safety there. And as an employer, don't you have expenses associated with anybody that is employed by you if they can't get to work because of a crash?
Well, we're glad that you're there. I know we've had a chance to meet a few times and done a few events together, and we really appreciate the work that the group does, the council does, to help spread our message of work zone safety. And it's something that as I travel the state, talk to our people, we're very concerned about. These are dangerous jobs. It seems as if people are in more of a hurry than they've ever been and more distracted than they've ever been. And oftentimes the only thing separating that distracted driver and our folks is a 3-foot orange cone. And so getting people to pay attention when they're in work zones and slow down and look out for our people is something we care a lot about. And I know you've been spreading that message with us.
Absolutely. We like to share that message year round. Right now, there's a reason it's coming up again, and I'm glad that we had this opportunity to talk to you. The first week or two every April is actually National Work Zone Awareness Week. You came out and joined us a year ago when we had a press conference at the Safety Council as well as the colonel with the State Patrol and the Lincoln Fire and Rescue Chief. And you all had the opportunity to speak a little bit about traffic safety and work zone safety at that time.
Yeah, that was a great event, Mark. I really appreciate the invitation, but not because I got to talk, but because of some of the people I got to meet when I was there, people who lost loved ones in work zones. Very moving day, and the message they were able to share, I think, was far more valuable to spreading the word than anything that John or I could say from the state's perspective. But remind me, and for our listeners, a little bit about who those folks were.
Sure, and I guess that's what made an impact on me. There was a 4-month period from September to December of 2017 where 4 different employees working on or near the road were in very serious crashes. One was a garbage truck driver up near Omaha. Then we had 2 workers here in Lincoln, one on Superior Street, and then also right over down the road here. And then Larry Miller, who was a tow truck driver and owner of Neff Towing in Omaha. And out of those 4 crashes, it just really hit me that for whatever reason, if it's now speed, if it's alcohol, if it's distraction, and I think probably all of those played some kind of a role in those crashes, the impact that it has on people. Is there some way that we can impress upon people that driving is a responsibility? The thing is, we take it for granted each and every day. We get up in the morning, we might be in a rush, get the kids ready, fix lunch, turn our key on, and take off. But driving is a responsibility, and we have a responsibility to scan ahead and look for hazards when we're driving. And the statistics are starting to show that since smartphones have come into existence, and now you can scroll with one finger when you're driving on a smartphone, that we start to see an increase in distracted driving crashes and fatalities since about 2011, whether it's in our state or the country as a whole.
Yeah. Well, I know I don't need to see the statistics, although I have seen them. I just have to talk to our folks that are out there on the road. They'll tell you. They see it firsthand every day, that people are looking down on their phone while they're driving through a work zone at 55 miles an hour, feet away from our people. So the more we can do, anything we can do is great.
And work zones are already inherently dangerous, right? They have narrower lane spaces, you have fewer lanes, maybe speed reductions, you have employees working closer to traffic, you have more equipment, equipment may be entering and leaving work zones. So it's already inherently dangerous, and then you add speed, you add distraction, you add maybe gap. You know, we don't talk enough about following distance and gap with vehicles, and particularly in the work zone, that's really important.
Well, I'm thankful that we get a chance to work together on it. I think it's so important. And do you see that issue? You know, we've talked about the work zone piece. Are there other safety topics on the road that you're tracking that you see as prominent issues of our day?
Motorcycle safety is certainly an issue. You know, it's a timely event now.
Yeah.
I'm actually working on developing for this summer some billboards, radio ads, social media content. We're going to be doing some digital advertising and marketing of motorcycle safety. One thing that we also see in our state is a rise in motorcycle fatalities and crashes, but we're also seeing some of those drivers, a rise in those drivers that don't have the M endorsement on their license. And we're seeing fewer people actually taking the Motorcycle Safety Foundation basic rider class, which teaches them some of the basic skills of being a safe rider.
So I hadn't heard that second one you mentioned, the M classification. Is that a certification that you need to drive a motorcycle? Technically, you're supposed to have it. Is that what it is?
By law, you need to have
By
it.
law.
You go down to the Department of Motor Vehicles, you go into the DMV.
My friends at DMV, yes.
Yeah, you take a written test, and then you take a skills test or a ride test. Now, you can circumnavigate that if you take a basic rider course, which is a weekend course offered by various organizations around the state, and then you spend the weekend training and learning.
And then you can get
the
that
basic
classification
skills.
on your license,
Yeah.
So we're seeing a rise in the number of people on motorcycles who don't have that training.
Correct.
Or haven't passed that test.
Correct.
Well, that's no good. We need to change that.
We do need to change that.
And the other thing on motorcycles is for the rest of us to look and see them. That's the same thing. I see a lot of signs and notifications about that, is being aware. of
Right,
motorcycles.
and so the campaign that we're coming out with this summer is actually twofold. The intent is to educate motorists and then also to educate riders, because it's really both components.
Yeah.
Another safety issue is pedestrian fatalities, right?
Yeah.
They're on the rise. Now, Some of that can be due to motorists and speed, following distance, distraction. But I just saw an interesting story in the news the other day where Tel Aviv has now installed at intersections red and green lights that flash on the ground for pedestrians that are looking down at their phone. So if they see at an intersection that the light shines green, then it's safe for them to walk across the road without even looking up from their phone. I don't personally believe that that is a solution to the problem.
Yeah, I don't know how to respond to that. I think in some ways it sounds like maybe you should ask people to look up from their phones, or maybe they're just smart and saying, people aren't going to, so let's try to help them. I don't know. I've seen the pedestrian numbers. We've seen the rise in Nebraska. You never want to overreact to something because the safety numbers, there are spikes, there are dips, and you don't want to over-celebrate and then just have it be a blip in a positive direction.
Sure.
But you also don't want to overreact to something in the negative direction. But it seems that the pedestrian thing has been with us for long enough that it's not a blip.
Well, and that's just it. And if we circle back to work zone safety, there was a blip about 4 years ago in the number of rise of crashes in work zones, and it shot up to over 900. But now, for 5 years worth of data, we now see that work zone crashes have averaged about 950 crashes each year for the last 5 years. So no longer is that really a blip. That's now the trend. That's the trend.
Well, and that's the challenge, because you want to use data to make decisions and inform your thinking on things, but there is an inherent sort of randomness to the crashes, and so being responsible with the data can be a challenge.
What do you see are solutions as, from an engineering standpoint, what do you see as solutions to that?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned you said Tel Aviv was doing that with the markers. I think that sometimes the solutions are counterintuitive. For example, some of the speed challenges that we have through communities in some of our rural towns, those roads were designed for those speeds. And so as communities have tried to promote different things, make more walkable communities, or promote people to walk and have sort of bikes and things mixed with traffic, the speeds don't necessarily accommodate that very well. But you can't just change the speed limit sign and get people to slow down. The road's designed and feels in your car like you should be able to drive a certain speed. I've wondered if maybe from the engineering side, it might be more productive from a safety perspective to start to narrow some of our highways as they come into town, or create some natural things that will slow people down. I don't know how popular that would be, but I know that we've talked about that in some strategic locations, like where we have schools and things, where just changing the speed limit to 45 is not going to solve your problem. You need to actually slow people down by giving them something to react to.
Right. And I do think when we talk about developing roadways that are safe for pedestrians and bicyclists, I think that is a trend. I'm seeing that across the country and around the world, actually. And having narrower lanes does show that, that is...
It actually improves safety,
Right.
Because it makes you pay attention.
Right. And part of that, I think, goes back, right now there's a campaign, Vision Zero, which is how do we make the roads more safe for everybody to utilize. I actually had an opportunity to write an article about Vision Zero in the NRMA magazine, Nebraska Risk Management magazine, Interchange, last summer, where I talked about the vision of how we drive vehicles, how we bicycle, how we exercise, how we walk on roadways, and how can we all do that safely. And the ultimate goal is Vision Zero, 0 fatalities on our roads by 2050. But how do we get there? And is that practical, or is that just pie in the sky? If we take a look at the airline industry, they had 2,400 fatalities back in 1972 when organizations and state and federal government came together to try to solve that crisis. And we have very few now commercial airline fatalities in the United States. I think we had the one fatality on a Southwest jet maybe a year or so ago, but we really turned the trend on that.
What the airline industry has accomplished is nothing less than remarkable. I mean, they pretty much at zero. You asked about the engineering. The other one that I thought of, I'm not offering a solution here, but it challenges your thinking, is that when you come to a traffic intersection, you're about to do the most dangerous thing you'll do in a car, which is cross traffic, left turns, right turns, and all those conflict points. That's the most dangerous thing you'll do in a car, is enter into intersections. And yet, what do? We put the indicator of whether you should go or not up in the sky so that you aren't looking at where the dangerous things are. You're looking up at an electronic device that is, if everyone follows, is fine. But oftentimes, that means you don't see the danger right before it comes. And it's been a great tool for efficiency, but I wonder sometimes if we would have thought about it differently and engineered those things in different ways where you could train people to look for the dangers rather than to trust the device in the sky. So
that's a great point. In February, I attended the ATSA national meeting down in Tampa, and I heard a story that came out of Idaho where they were doing some construction in a work zone, and they had narrowed the road from 5 lanes down to 3, and they had some barrels set up. Well, they were finding even with the barrels set up, people were trying to make a left-hand turn where they shouldn't. So eventually they put in some movable barriers, and they went with that, and at the conclusion of the project, they found that they prevented by 24 left-hand turn crashes, which are the dangerous crashes when you're turning in front of other traffic.
Yeah. Mark, before you go, I wanted to ask you one more question. Do you do anything to promote seatbelt usage? I know that's one of the things we talk a lot about and care a lot about, and the numbers say that that's the number one thing people can do.
Right, that's actually a great question, because my primary objective is when I speak to employers and employees around the state is to talk about occupant protection or seatbelt usage. In the last 2.5 years, I've actually made over 300 presentations to over 250 employers, reaching 10,000 employees, talking about the significance of just buckling up.
Yep.
You know, we talk about the simple physics of it. An object in motion stays in motion unless they're held back. It's not uncommon. You know, moms and dads, people are busy in this day and age. You know, maybe you take the extra couple of minutes to make sure your children are buckled up. But if you jump in the car, the truck, behind the steering wheel, if you get T-boned, there's a 40% greater chance of injury or fatality from an unbuckled occupant. You could end up causing a catastrophic injury to those little ones. And so that's very important.
Is that because you're not buckled in, so you're traveling around in the car, or because you lost control of the car?
Well,
or
both. Seatbelts do 3 things, right? They protect us and keep us in the safest spot possible so that seatbelts work with airbags so that we don't fly through the front window or outside through the side window if we get T-boned. But they also help us maintain control of that vehicle. So perhaps we can steer away from a secondary ditch, a utility pole, a tree. You know, in Nebraska, rural road fatalities are double that than in urban areas. And so it's real important when we take a look at seatbelt usage rates. A lot of rural counties have very low rates. Dakota County, Scottsbluff County, they maybe wear their seatbelts about 65% of the time, versus in urban areas where it's up in the mid-80s. And so that goes hand in hand there. You know, that's just the significance of wearing that. Today we hear a lot about distracted driving and crashes. But distracted driving, depending on what study you look at, maybe accounts for 26 or 28% of the crashes. When we take a look at the statistics from Nebraska in 2017, 71% of the road fatalities in Nebraska were unbuckled. That's really a big issue.
So I get a notification every time there's an emergency on our highways, so it could be a road closure, any number of things, but one of them is on fatalities. And it is stunning to see. It's heartbreaking. You get 2, 3, 4 a week, and every time, you know, you open it and you read, and nearly every time it's not buckled. It is really hard to take. And so I'm glad you're helping us with that message. You know, Nebraska's done a good job in recent years in terms of seatbelt usage. It's been ticking up about 3% a year in the 4 years I've been tracking it since moving here. We're making progress, and I think last year we were at 87%, which is good, but it's not 100, so we got work to do.
There is a difference, you know, when you talk about seatbelt usage rates and from state to state. There's about a 9% difference with states that have a primary law and states that have a secondary law. For example, Iowa and Kansas have a primary law. That means an officer can pull you over if they see you without your seatbelt. And those states tend to wear their seatbelts about 9% more than states with a secondary law.
Yeah, I've seen those numbers. I know Nebraska, we don't have that law. There's been discussions of it in the past. I also know that when I was looking at the numbers of the states that don't have the primary, Nebraska was either number 1 or number 2, I can't remember, in terms of states that don't have that primary law and how high the seatbelt usage was. So as much as we'd like to see everybody wearing their seatbelt, Nebraskans are also practical people, and they are.
And
we
that's,
encourage it.
And that's true. Nebraska Safety Council partners with the Nebraska DOT Highway Safety Office
Sure.
on an annual poll of over 900 Nebraskans in all 3 congressional districts. And every year in that poll, more and more Nebraskans tick up on the importance of having a primary seatbelt law. However, right now, about 58% would support such a law. So it's not everybody.
And that's interesting too, Mark, because I know I've been told I wasn't a citizen of Nebraska at the time, but there at one point the legislature did pass the primary seatbelt law, and the voters went to the ballot, and the voters overturned it. And I think it was close, and I want to say it was maybe 20 years ago, but that might be something. As I've studied the history of it, that was one of the things that was pointed out to me.
So are you a Cornhusker now?
Well, my wife is a Cornhusker, so I've been a Cornhusker since the day I met her. But I'm a Jayhawk born and bred, so I wear red on Saturdays in the fall, and I have been for a while. But it's starting to get in my blood a little bit with the new coach. And I took my 6-year-old to a game last year, and he's a diehard fan now. In fact, last night I took him his first flag football practice. He's 6. And when he introduced himself, he said, my name's Maslow, and my favorite team's the Huskers. And I thought, well, there it is. So.
There you go. There you go.
Mark, thank you for coming today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for all the work you're doing. I appreciate it. And look forward to partnering with you many more times in the future.
Thank you so much.
All right, thanks. All right, that's my conversation with Mark. Mark, thanks for being with us. And I just want to remind everybody, slow down in work zones, be safe, take it slow, be patient, and always, always buckle up.